Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to continue to proceed along the line of questioning that we've been engaged in today. But I do want to point out that it's important to note here, we're not only talking about when we look at relicensing operations units that are held privately by utility companies, but also public utility companies as well that are held by the public in trust to provide energy for that public purpose. Mr. Robinson, with your past experience on FERC, typically how long would you say a relicensing, a facility that has been built, that's been operating for 30, 50 years, whatever, takes to be relicensed?
Beyond way too long.
Way too long is defined by what, 4 to 6 years? That seems to be.
When we put our regs in place in 2005 for the ILP, the integrated licensing process, which was supposed to try to provide discipline, we recognized there that it would be 5 to 5.5 years to relicense existing projects.
Did the rest of you concur with that? Is it 5 years plus or minus about average?
In our project, we started 3 years before that, so actually 8 years.
So you're 8 years at Placer.
Right.
And anybody else take issue with that timeline?
We're 7 years today.
You're 7 years.
And we're still not in the final license.
And Mr. Reardon, you have a different perspective?
I've applied for one set of licenses from FERC, and I think we were 2.5 years from application to receipt.
Well, you better give an inside track to these others. Obviously,
the other thing I might say though is that it depends a lot on the project. Complicated.
No, obviously it does, and that's an average. But that's my experience, 4 to 6 years. It appears under Section 18 of the Federal Power Act that the National Marine Fisheries Service, otherwise known as NMFS, seems to have absolute unfettered discretion when it comes to relicensing to impose conditions, and that FERC has no discretion to modify these conditions. Would Mr. Robinson, Mr. Marsh, you care to comment quickly?
Yeah, quickly. You're correct, but beyond that, depending upon where you are in the National Marine Fisheries Service around the country, they will use that authority and they will leverage that to try to take on larger agency interests like basin restoration on the back of a single project.
And shouldn't FERC be able to balance the competing interests on energy supply and water supply, flood control? I mean, to the degree that you draw the process out, to the degree that you take, I mean, these projects are built for power purposes, but they're also sometimes provide flood control component as well as water supply. And to the degree that they leverage, as you put it, and now the water is reduced for the other purposes, but they don't have to pay for those. It's the ratepayers that are paying for that. Is that not the case?
That's exactly the case. You're exactly right. The FERC, or excuse me, National Marine Fisheries Service, as well as the
if the benefits are so important to the increased for the fisheries, it seems to me that it shouldn't come out of the ratepayers that are paying for the increased benefits.
Well, there's no place else for it to come.
Mr. Corliss, you have a comment there?
Yes. When we make our rates, we use a philosophy called cost causer, cost payer, in that the cost associated with serving a group of customers should be paid by that group of customers. It seems to me in this process, the individual agencies don't adhere to that same philosophy. If the project drives the cost, the project should pay for the cost. But if the agencies want ancillary benefits out of that project, it shouldn't come out of the cost of the project, and it shouldn't.
No, I concur. I mean, we even have some projects that I'm familiar with in which, on flow requirements that they've leveraged or attempted to leverage, that they're, by their own admission, has been a case where adrominous fish have not, may never, ever existed in the waterways. But yet,
case in point is Enlow Dam.
Where?
Enlow Dam, the project that we're licensing.
Well, same thing in the Tuolumne River,
Right.
but they don't care because they have the leverage, And under Section 18 under the Federal Power Act, they use it. So it seems to me that balance has to be achieved here. We even have a more difficult circumstance, and my time's expired, where hydropower in California under the Renewable Energy Act is not included or counted as renewable, which is beyond my comprehension. But nonetheless, Mr. Chairman, I think this is an area that we need to continue to try to refine and see if there's something that we can do to make some sense out of this, because these are projects that were built for the purpose of providing public power for the people in this country, and the relicensing is critical to continue that effort and being held up at the pass, so to speak, because there's an opportunity for relicensing when the whole financial structure for these projects was based upon a certain amount of power being able to be generated based upon water supply and flood control, and now that you change the equation with no cost, with ratepayers having to pay all the costs, is unfair and inappropriate, I think.
The